For students in the International Baccalaureate program for physics, there's just two more forces that we have to just discuss a little bit here as part of the IB physics program. So the first one is this thing called the drag force. Drag force, it's sort of like a frictional force. It's going to oppose motion of a body through a fluid, and usually we could think of these fluids like a gas, like the air, or a liquid. And so when we're talking about through the air, we're talking about air resistance. And then if we're talking about through a liquid, then yeah, we're probably going to talk about like a viscous drag force or something to that effect. So drag force is just like being a type of frictional force. It's going to be directed opposite to the velocity of the object. The magnitude of drag forces are not constant. They will change depending on the shape and the speed of the object. What we generally find is that the higher the speed, the higher the drag force. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation about this a little bit later in the unit. The last one is this thing called upthrust. You probably have heard it more referred to as buoyancy. They refer to the same thing. And this is almost, you could almost think of it sort of like an equivalent of a normal force inside of a fluid. It's basically going to be this upthrust. It's basically going to be this upwards force that is supplied by a fluid. So for example, if we have something in water, the weight is going to be directed down, but you're also going to have this upthrust that is directed upwards. So the water is kind of pushing this thing up. Now if you have an object floating, like in this case a box or a person, the weight of that object is going to be balanced by the upthrust. So you're going to have something that's going to float. If you have something where the weight is greater than the upthrust, then this object is going to start to sink. And then if you have the other case, especially if you're doing things like diving and all that, where you have the upthrust is greater than the weight, then this thing is going to start to rise towards the surface. But upthrust or buoyancy, this is caused by pressure that fluid exerts on the body. And then yeah, of course, we can certainly, we can change that upthrust depending on what we're doing, like submarines make use of that. I just mentioned a little bit earlier, divers make use of that with pressures and tanks and all of that. So yeah, this drag force and this upthrust, these are the only two additional forces that you will need to know for your IB physics program.